please take the attendance?
Chairwoman Miller,
Here.
Veronica Pies, or Representative Pies, sorry.
That's who I am.
Representative Stone,
Here.
Representative Young, Representative Copia,
Here.
Representative Devendorf,
Here.
Representative Fitzgerald,
Here.
Representative Reingans,
Here.
Representative Nyer,
Here.
Representative Vanderwall,
Present.
Representative Roth,
Here.
Representative Bierlein,
Here.
Representative Smith.
Present.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Heis moves to adopt the minutes of April 19th. Going forward, we will now have a presentation from Amanda Shreve of the Michigan Farmers Market Association. Please come up and introduce yourself. And to the committee and members, please hold your questions to the end of the presentation and direct those questions through the chair.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. My name is Amanda Shreve. I'm the Executive Director for the Michigan Farmers Market Association. I'm thrilled to be here this morning to talk to you about farmers markets and community-driven marketplaces across Michigan. So farmers markets are a very tangible way to connect consumers with agriculture and local food. So there are a lot of reasons why farmers markets are important to Michigan agriculture. They are very visible representations of our industry. They cultivate atmosphere in communities. They're very community-centric, very based in their community, reflect the community around them, and become community gathering places where neighbors communicate and meet each other on a Saturday morning or a Wednesday afternoon and really build that community atmosphere. They are places where agriculture connects directly to the public, and that has so much value when it comes to education and awareness and economy. They are, most of them in Michigan, seasonally based, but we do have a growing number of markets that operate year-round, or what we call extended season, which typically goes into November, close to Thanksgiving, or possibly even a holiday market in December. There are also educational opportunities, as I mentioned, where we can educate the public about agricultural production and products and value-added products and the food industry in Michigan. And they are perceived as representative by the general public. And what I mean by that is when the public thinks of agriculture, most of our consumers we know these days are lacking that direct connection through family or through their own employment. And so when they come to a farmer's market, they are perceiving the market as representative of the agricultural production in their community. And so for that reason, we see them as ambassadors, public ambassadors of our overall agricultural system here in Michigan. And farmers markets in Michigan really thrive. We have more than 300 community-based farmers markets, and as you can see by this map, they're spread all across the state. We have fantastic representation in our urban centers, and we also have them spread out throughout our rural areas, including across the UP. Farmers market growth in Michigan really grew exponentially in the early 2000s, reaching from around 90 in 2001 up to our peak in 2012 of well over 300 community-based farmers markets. And we now, since 2012, have really leveled out around 300. We still have some markets that open new each year. We still have a couple markets that close each year or evolve into different models. So we're around 300 community-based farmers markets across our state. And that makes us a leader in the number of farmers markets that we have compared to other states. We also know that farmers markets in Michigan, some of them have been operating for more than 100 years. We have a great history of farmers markets throughout our state, especially in the Detroit area, around the terminal markets, and they have continued to add throughout our history, and then we have a phenomenal number of new markets operating less than 10 years, even some operating less than 1 or 2 or 3 years. So there is a continual evolution of new farmers markets opening, mixed in with that great historical component of markets that have been around in their communities for decades. So who operates farmers markets in Michigan? We did a census of Michigan farmers markets in 2020, and we know that 41% of our community-based farmers markets are operated by a local unit of government. So whether that's a DDA or a Parks and Rec or a city or township or county government, 41% of our 300 markets are operated by a local unit of government, and that usually provides a phenomenal base of support for that farmers market. Another 25% are operated by nonprofits throughout our state. And then there's a few other models too, including chamber-operated farmers markets, a few privately operated markets, a couple operated by food co-ops, healthcare organizations, hospitals hosting farmers markets, and then universities as well. Michigan State, Grand Valley, recognizing the need for fresh food in their community and operating farmers markets to help meet that need. So why do farmers markets exist? When we ask market managers, why does your market operate? What's its core purpose and value? Overwhelmingly, support for local farmers is the top reason why farmers markets are operating. And a close second behind that is increasing healthy food access. And that's a tremendous goal for a lot of the markets throughout our state. So supporting local farmers and increasing healthy food access, hopefully something everyone can get around, both very worthy goals for our farmers markets. So why do farmers markets thrive in Michigan? Why is Michigan a leader nationally in farmers markets? One reason is that farmers markets thrive throughout our country. We've seen an increasing number of farmers markets throughout all of the states, but particularly in Michigan. And markets thrive in Michigan because our agriculture is so diverse. I probably don't need to tell the Agriculture Committee this, but I'll just remind you that we are the second most agriculturally diverse state in the country, behind California, which doesn't really count. And we produce more than 300 agricultural products commercially. So we have a tremendous variety of products, and because we're producing so much variety in here in Michigan, there's so much opportunity for those products to come directly to markets and be sold direct to consumers. We also know that Michigan is a leader in food assistance acceptance at farmers markets. And when farmers markets accept food assistance benefits, they not only create and expand healthy food access for the most vulnerable in our communities, but they also increase farmer sales and create a community-wide benefit in improving health and connection. We have a number of food assistance programs that farmers markets in Michigan can participate in, the largest one being our Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, here in Michigan referred to as the Food Assistance Program and delivered through the SNAP Bridge Card. More than 160 of our 300 community-based farmers markets accept this food assistance benefit. And when they accept SNAP, they have the opportunity then to participate in the Double Up Food Bucks program, which I hope you're all familiar with, which is our statewide SNAP incentive program that matches SNAP dollars spent at participating retailers for additional dollars to purchase more Michigan-grown fresh fruits and vegetables, expanding healthy food access, growing farmer income, creating a win-win-win all across the board. We also have two voucher-based programs run by the state of Michigan, the WIC Farmers Market Nutrition Program and Senior Farmers Market Nutrition Program, obviously serving those two particular audiences based on their name. Here in Michigan, we call those WIC Project Fresh and Market Fresh. And we have a growing number of produce prescription programs across our state as well. And those programs really link health and food, fresh fruit and vegetable consumption. And those programs partner healthcare organizations and farmers markets and other healthy food retailers where the doctor or healthcare entity prescribes fresh fruits and vegetables to a specific target audience to help them address a health concern. And they bring that prescription to the participating retailer, and it becomes the way that they purchase fresh fruits and vegetables. And those programs are expanding across our state. And we are a leader nationally in this food assistance work. We're ranked 4th in the number of farmers markets authorized to accept SNAP and in the dollar value that flows through our farmers markets. Another reason that farmers markets thrive in Michigan is because direct marketing farmers can thrive in Michigan. We know from the most recent ag census in 2017 that over $554 million worth of agricultural sales in our state are sold directly to consumers by farmers each year. That's the 4th largest sum of any state. We know that approximately 5,300 farms in Michigan direct market at least some of their agricultural production. And direct marketing farmers in Michigan are very diversified and varied. They may be growing organically or conventionally. They're often small to medium-sized growers, often very diversified in what they're producing several different crops, primarily focused around specialty crops, and also utilizing their specialty crops in a number of value-added products. So because direct marketing farmers can thrive in Michigan, they really are the backbone of community-based farmers markets. But we also recognize that over the last decade, especially, marketing models for local food in Michigan have expanded greatly, as they have across the country. So, of course, core to our heart will always be farmers markets, but we're recognizing that there are a lot of ways to meet consumers and to connect consumers directly with producers through farm stands, restaurant sales, farm to school and farm to institution sales, often aided by food hubs, through the community-supported agriculture model, or CSAs, and then we have more and more grocery stores and corner stores also featuring local food. So with that, we entered into a strategic planning process last year, and the Michigan Farmers Market Association has expanded our mission and vision. So our mission is now to place equity at the forefront of supporting the viability of community-driven marketplaces so that they can connect all consumers to local farms and businesses. And we envision a future where community-driven marketplaces are pillars of thriving communities, where everyone has equitable access to and feels connected to the products grown and produced here in Michigan. So what do I mean by community-driven marketplaces? These are programs that directly facilitate the exchange between consumers and producers of local food and farm products. Many of the models that I just mentioned, also adding in food box programs and mobile markets and alternative retail models we haven't even envisioned yet, but they're direct connections between consumers and producers. So I am in front of a policy body, so I of course need to mention our advocacy work, and we do advocate for policies that place community-driven farmers markets, or community-driven marketplaces, at the forefront of the local food movement. We're hoping to increase awareness and consumption of the state's diverse agricultural products and to ensure equitable access to fresh, nutritious local foods. So there's 4 items I'd like to hit on today as I wrap up my presentation. The first, I mentioned those produce prescription programs, and we are working to advance those models across our state. They are ready, proven models that show healthcare expense or healthcare impacts and phenomenal health impacts and economic impacts for farmers that participate. And we believe they are ready for to be a covered expense by both private insurance and Medicaid and Medicare. We are also monitoring an effort by the state to modernize the WIC and Senior Project Fresh programs. I mentioned that those programs are both right now voucher-based, and a directive from USDA has encouraged states to modernize those and transition them into a card-based delivery model. And that could be a phenomenal step for these programs to make them more sustainable, to make them more easy to utilize, but that could also be catastrophic if the transition isn't done in a thoughtful way that takes into consideration both how the participant, the user of those benefits, interacts with the program, and also the retailer that accepts those benefits interacts with the program. And so we want to help we want to help the state, particularly the Department of Health and Human Services, be conscientious as those decisions are made about how to modernize those programs so that they take into account how both the participants and the retailers interact with that program. I would be remiss if I didn't mention our support for the Double Up Food Bucks program and the need for state funding to support that. We do need a commitment from the state to fund that program and to fully utilize the available federal funding that is available for that program now and in the future. And I hope that's all on your radar as we move through the budgetary process. And last but not least, something that's really core to your work here on this committee, we are very interested in seeing updates to the cottage food law. This law was passed back in 2012 to allow non-potentially hazardous food items to be made in home kitchens by small food entrepreneurs to help them get into the market, test a product, test their business model, and then eventually move on to a licensed model as they grow their business. That law needs some updates, and you have a bill before this committee, House Bill 4333, to make those necessary updates, and we're very much in support of that bill. So those are our 2023 state policy priorities. We won't get into the national priorities, but of course it's a Farm Bill year, and so we're doing work on that as well. So with that, I'll conclude my presentation and open it up to any questions you might have. I'm happy to answer anything that is lingering for you.
Madam Chair?
Thank you. We appreciate that presentation. I see these farmers markets growing. they're turning into festivals in a lot of areas where we have to shut down and reroute traffic, and that's wonderful. So in marginalized areas and areas of low income, how are you growing that particular area with farmers markets? How are you doing that? How are you getting them in those areas? I see the wonderful work you're doing otherwise, and that's great, but I'd like for you to talk a little bit more on that.
I think when farmers markets are most successful, they are community driven. And so the greatest thing that we can do as a statewide farmers market association is support community efforts to build markets in their own communities. So we provide resources like a feasibility guide for starting a new farmers market in Michigan to help you determine if one is really going to be successful in your community. We're looking later this year to publish a guide on once you've decided to start a market, how do you go forward from there? We provide training and technical assistance to market operators to ensure that they're successful and to professionalize the role of a market manager, which is essential to having these markets operate. So the best thing that we can do is really support those community efforts from within that community to build new marketplaces. I think what's really interesting about the expanding retail models that connect producers and consumers directly is that most of them are coming out of those marginalized communities or those very urban communities that have that really struggle with healthy food access. They have been some of the most innovative communities in developing new models. Mobile markets work really well in urban communities. Food box programs that really bridge that last mile gap between food access and home consumption. So in particular, urban areas and marginalized communities have really found some of those more innovative models in addition to farmers markets to be successful in bridging that healthy food access gap.
Thank you for that. We're going to take other questions. Rep. Heiss.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was wondering if you have any statistics on the communities that many of these serve, population, socioeconomic status, things like that.
Not in my pocket, but I would be happy to dive in further, especially if there's a particular market or a particular community you're interested in mapping further. I would also mention that there is a phenomenal tool by the Michigan Fitness Foundation called the Map to Healthy Living. Thank you, Joe. Joe Lasowski, our Food Access Director from the Peanut Gallery in the back. And that has all of our farmers markets loaded into that map. And that tool can layer on demographics, can layer on additional food resources and additional community resources in an area, can look at how many SNAP eligible families are living within certain distances around our farmers markets. And so I'd be happy to follow up if there's a specific community that you're looking at, but I would also direct you to that Map to Healthy Living for those that kind of mapping and deep dive into the communities surrounding farmers markets.
Wonderful, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Next, Rep. Vanderwall.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate it very much, and thank you for being here. And live in a community, of course, that's very agriculture-based when we're seeing explosions in all our small communities. As one of the largest competitors right now in the state of Michigan is a product that's coming in from foreign countries. Have you been advocating with other groups on making sure that tariffs for product that is grown in Michigan can remain competitive and that the tariff from the foreign country is raised up?
When I mentioned that farmers markets are perceived as representative of our agricultural production here in the state, I think that's a real asset to all farmers in our state, whether they are selling direct to consumers or whether they're selling into wholesale markets or even not domestic markets. And so I think that where farmers markets come into that picture is creating a growing consumer awareness of what we produce here in Michigan and how important it is to support local farmers, and whether they're coming to the farmers market to access that or whether we're teaching them about how to identify local food in their grocery store or in other places where they're buying their food. I think that that's where farmers markets really support that effort, is to create that consumer awareness of local production and reinforce that message that we produce so much here in Michigan. Let's buy what we produce here in Michigan. Let's prioritize that with our purchase power.
Thank you.
Representative Nyer.
Thank you, Chair. Working with SNAP and WIC and the seniors program there, what's the most challenging thing about administering that? You know, you're not, typically your farmers markets are being held in a park location or outside of Privy. Is getting access to internet challenging, or is the paperwork, getting it in there, or getting getting the people that are wanting to use the WIC and other programs? What's the most challenging part about that, and is there any way that we can help facilitate that changeover or moving into that space to make it easier for those people to get that food?
Thank you for that question. The answer is D, all of the above. One thing that we can do, we recognize that there are barriers to accepting food assistance benefits at farmers markets, and that the more we can do to reduce those barriers, the more access we can help create. And so particularly when it comes to SNAP, one thing that we recognize is that the device that's required to accept SNAP benefits via the EBT bridge card is expensive. It's expensive to purchase, it's expensive to maintain. And so what we have advocated for is state funding and state support for the cost of that equipment so that that does not become a barrier to farmers and farmers markets accepting SNAP. We have received historically 2 state appropriations to support the cost of those devices, and we'd very much like to see and continue to advocate for that support to be wrapped into the state's EBT contract, which is renewed about every 5 years, so that supporting farmers and their ability to accept SNAP benefits is innate to how we administer the SNAP program in our state. We have the opportunity to include that in our state EBT contract as part of the services they provide, and so that we never have to worry again whether farmers and farmers markets can access that equipment. And so we continue to target that as one way that we can eliminate a barrier to accepting food assistance benefits in markets. Other things that are necessary to that equation are support for the market managers themselves. These programs have administrative burden as far as the application process, processing the transactions, getting through the reimbursement process, and farmers markets are key to that equation. We know that there was a national survey done in the last decade that showed that when there's a paid market manager in a market, their food assistance redemption increases 80%. And so that we know when we're supporting the staff that run markets, they can create bigger impact, and especially in terms of healthy food access. So we can remove barriers, we can support farmers market operators, and we can also, of course, educate consumers and help reach them with the information that markets accept food assistance benefits, where they can go, how they can use those benefits, what some of the advantages are of shopping at a farmer's market when they have those benefits, how markets help them expand their purchasing power, help them shop seasonally, help them access fresh, nutritious fruits and vegetables that have been picked very recently and have the greatest nutritional value. So all along the equation, there are opportunities to support markets in their healthy food access work, particularly with accepting food assistance benefits. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. My question is about your policy priorities on the previous slide. The first one says advancing produce prescription programs, and it says that produce prescription programs are ready to be a healthcare expense covered by private insurance and or Medicaid or Medicare.
Yep.
And so I'm wondering if you can clarify that, and I might have some follow-up questions. I'm on the Health Policy Committee and very interested in how healthcare dollars might be used on food, which is like the first type of medicine we should maybe consider in our lives.
Absolutely. Maybe you should come up and sit next to me for this presentation. I appreciate those comments. So produce prescription programs have been operating in Michigan since 2008. And right now we have anywhere in any given year between 15 and 20 of these programs operating throughout our state. And right now these programs have really come up grassroots from the communities with partnerships between healthcare entities and food retailers. And the funding for these programs has come from a number of sources, mostly philanthropic dollars, sometimes directly from the healthcare system themselves, sometimes from the surrounding community. And what we know about philanthropic dollars is they're a fantastic way to pilot something, they're a fantastic way to start something, but that's not a very sustainable funding model. We know that philanthropic dollars, their focus areas shift and change over time, and that they don't love to refund programs. They like to start something new and then have it sustained through an alternative source rather than re-granting each year. So what we're really looking at is sustainable funding models that allow these programs to continue to operate and to expand. And we identify a number of opportunities both in having private insurance cover these programs as a benefit and also Medicaid coverage as well. And there's a number of different opportunities within Medicaid, whether it be through contracts for managed care organizations, through the state applying for an 1115 waiver, which would allow the state to pilot incorporating these programs as a covered benefit through Medicaid. And there are a couple other policy avenues that we can take. But the overall message is these programs are ready. They're ready for state investment. They're ready for support. They're ready for those sustainable funding models. They've proven themselves.
So as a follow-up, I guess, are there other states that have gotten CMS approval to the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services at the federal level, which approves our state plan of what we're allowed to spend Medicaid dollars on? Are there other states that have approved this as an allowable expense for Medicaid dollars?
Yes, ma'am.
Which states?
So North Carolina was one of the first through an 1115 waiver. And California is very close. And I believe there's two more, and they're escaping me right now. I also know that Oregon has incorporated it through their managed care organization contracts. And I'd be happy to follow up with you on those other two states.
Great. I would love to talk more. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you again. Typically, what's the greatest expense these farm markets are seeing in operating there? Is there one thing, or is it dependent upon the location or the clients?
Each farmer's market is unique. That's one of the great things about them. I would say some of the most common expenses, certainly staff support, the market manager's salary, and often that's the last expense we see covered. Markets have to cover things like porta potties, space rental, any local permits they might have to have. They often prioritize any expenses for food assistance programs because it's so key to their mission to be able to do those programs. So whether they need to purchase tokens or whether they have expenses associated with their point of sale device or outreach, marketing is a common expense. But I would say after all of those expenses, the market manager's salary and paying someone to operate the market and be its champion and be its steward and make sure it operates and has everything it needs, that's the expense that often gets tabled. That's the expense that often gets reduced. That's the one that markets struggle to fully support. Mm-hmm.
Representative Devendorf.
Today. I so appreciate you advocating for market manager salaries as somebody who managed a farmer's market, and also for advocating for those machines. And I would advocate for the most up-to-date version of those machines at all times to make everybody's lives easier. The question I had was, you mentioned that farmers markets are often considered to be representative of the community. How do we ensure that they are representative of the community, not just in the folks that we serve, but also in the vendors that are given opportunity and space to sell their goods there? And I ask that because I started to see farmers markets after a time working with them as kind of agriculture incubators for a lot of folks. So I certainly appreciate your support for changes to cottage food laws. But how do we get those diversity in the vendors?
Yes. Well, I can say that we have not grown direct marketing farmers at the same rate that we have grown farmers markets in our state. And that in our 2020 census, we asked farmers and farmers market operators what's the number one type of vendor that's difficult to recruit to your market that you could always use more of, and farmers are always the top. And so the more that we can do to support direct marketing farmers and be that incubator for new and beginning farmers, the more it serves farmers, the more it serves markets, the more it serves communities and healthy food access. So absolutely, we would love to work with anyone and everyone to help support new farmers in our state, and particularly bringing them direct to consumers through farmers markets and other models. I think that farmers markets, some of the things that they can do are to ensure there is always space in the market for new vendors. Some of the long-standing markets, they have long-standing vendors who've been there for generations. Their farms and their businesses have been coming there. But when we reserve specifically space in the market for new vendors, it allows us to rotate in and give those new businesses and new farmers opportunity to get into the marketplace and test it out. I think that the Farmers Market Association serves a role in helping to connect farmers to markets, and also to help markets with data collection and analysis and reporting, so that farmers really know which markets are going to be the best fit for them. You know, what's the foot traffic coming to this market? How successful are vendors at this market? Where are customers in this area looking for more product that I'm selling? So the more we can support markets in data collection and sharing that data that they're receiving from their customers and from their operations, the more it helps vendors and farmers make educated decisions about where they'll fit best into the marketplace. And the cottage food law is a tremendous asset to bringing in new vendors to markets, also allowing new products to be brought to market. And we have some survey data from recently, fairly recently, that shows that approximately 50% of the cottage food businesses operating at farmers markets right now are farmers and vendors who are using the cottage food law to create additional value-added products and grow their product offering, grow their income, and become more viable. So the cottage food law absolutely has a role in being an incubator and welcoming new vendors to the market. I would also want to mention that we are, you saw in our mission how invested we are in equity and placing equity at the forefront of supporting community-driven marketplaces. We are also working through our Racial Equity Committee to launch a cohort of market managers who are invested in implementing initiatives at their market that expand the racial diversity, equity, and inclusion of their markets, both on the vendor side and also on the consumer side, making sure that our markets are as inclusive as we want them to be, endeavor that they be, and that we are identifying and eliminating barriers, especially to BIPOC producers to come to market and participate, and also for consumers to feel welcome there as well.
Okay, we're going to wrap up with Representative Roth.
I'm just going to ask you, thank you, Madam Chair. We had 8 cottage food laws introduced last year. Mm-hmm. Did any of them see the finish line? I don't think so. And
fair question.
Yes. So are you working to revive some of that, or are we looking to put it all in one bill?
So there were 3 cottage food related bills that made it close to the finish line, and 1 did make it over. So last year we had 2 bills that really had different concepts, different updates to the cottage food bill, and they made it through the House, and they were at the Senate committee at the end of the year. And then the 3rd law, in order to implement and enforce the changes that were being proposed in the 2 laws last year, there needed to be changes to the Weights and Measures Act in order for the Department of Agriculture to be able to enforce the changes we were recommending. And those changes actually did make it through. So the Weights and Measures Act is ready for us to make the changes to the cottage food law that we would like to see. And the concepts from the two bills that got furthest last year have been combined into House Bill 4333 that you have in front of your committee. So we really feel like this is the best representation of the work left over from last year that still needs to be done.
Thank you.
Hey, indulge me one last question.
Please.
So how do you prioritize your policies? How do you decide that?
I love that question. Thank you for asking it. We are a member-based association, and so including our members in that process is essential. We have an advocacy committee made up of board members, staff, our members at large, and also advocacy advisors and partners. We meet on a monthly basis. That committee prepares a slate of policy priorities for the year. And then at our annual meeting, which is held the first week in March at our Michigan Farmers Market Conference, our members review that slate. They can make additions to it from the floor of that meeting if they'd like, and then they vote to prioritize. And we have both statewide policy priorities and national policy priorities. So our members and our advocacy committee are essential to that process.
Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
For presenting today. You had a lot of challenging questions, and we appreciate that. And again, thank you.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
Next, we will be hearing a presentation from Kelly Turner with the Michigan potato industry. Please come up and have a seat and introduce yourself to the members. And thank you for those potato chips yesterday. Again, much appreciated.
My pleasure to be here. I am Dr. Kelly Turner. I am the Executive Director of the Michigan Potato Industry.
Kelly, can you turn on your mic?
Hey, is that helpful? Will we start over? I am Dr. Kelly Turner with the Michigan Potato Industry Commission. I'm the Executive Director and have the wonderful job of being able to represent the large potato growers in this state. Is there a presentation mode for this? Maybe not. We'll go with this. Oh, thanks for the IT help. I appreciate it. Oh, look at, I just learned something new. Excellent. Well, I was invited here to present on the Michigan Potato Industry Commission. Full disclosure, I also work for the Potato Growers of Michigan, which is a separate dues-paying organization. It's a voluntary organization, and we do two kind of very different things, but succinctly to make sure that we're representing everyone in the industry. So I want to give you today kind of a quick overview of the whole industry and all of the different players and who we work with, and then we'll get into what our priorities are and kind of how we fulfill those and the partners we work with. And then, of course, in the end, we'll have an invitation for you guys to come out and see in person some of the things that we're talking about today, and then wrap up. So to start with, there really are four main potato organizations that we work with or for within the state to advance the potato industry. So as you can see, two of them on the left-hand side are state organizations, so that's the Potato Commission and the Potato Growers of Michigan, which I said is a dues-paying voluntary organization. We have the same thing at the national level. So Potatoes USA also functions through the USDA, kind of like Michigan Potato Commission does, so they get assessments. Every time a potato grower sells 100 pounds of potatoes, they get a couple of cents. I think it's 3 cents, and we get 6.5 cents. And then we use that as our operating money for the year to carry out the mission of those organizations. Also, in conjunction with the potato growers, we have the National Potato Council. So that is an organization, dues-paying structure. It's a voluntary organization that really looks at the regulatory environment at the national level for the potato industry. So let's take a look at the industry by the numbers, and this is going to be by far the most boring slide that I have. So a lot of pictures because I'm very kinesthetic, and so Statistics, though, are important for you to have to really understand the volume that we have within the state. Because a lot of people go, I didn't know we grew potatoes in Michigan. We actually grow quite a few. We are like the Idaho of chipping potatoes. So Idaho, people most know them for their russets, right? We grow russets in the state of Michigan as well. However, we do grow mostly chipping potatoes, which is why we have 4 potato chipping processors in the state alone. What does this look like, number of acres? So for those of you who have a farming background, this gives you a sense of how large the industry is at 47,000. We do fluctuate, so potatoes take a 3 to 5 year rotation, which that means that if you plant it 1 year, you can't plant potatoes in the same place until 3 years later, or up to 5 years later, because they take a lot of nutrients from the soil, and it takes a long time to rebuild those nutrients in that soil composite. We have 1.8 billion pounds of potatoes, so it's a lot more than you can probably even imagine. I still get overwhelmed when I go to facilities and I see acres and acres of potatoes in storage. Like, the volume is just incredible. We employ more than 3,200 employees in the state, and back in 2017, we had $554 million in economic activity. We're currently working with Michigan State University to update those numbers. The National Potato Council just redid their numbers this year, and they were a $101.1 billion industry across the nation. That jumped up quite a bit, especially after the pandemic. We've had a lot of changes in the marketplace, and a lot of costs have went up, and so how we compare that to the number of jobs we provide and the economic activity, that number is probably going to go up quite a bit. We are ranked number 1 in chip stock, as I said, so no matter where you are in the United States, if you open up a bag of chips, no matter what kind they are, you've got almost a 30% chance of those potatoes that were in that bag being grown in the state. So like I said, we are the Idaho for chipping potatoes. When you take a look nationally, we're ranked 6th in the value of the crop that we have. So people don't realize, yes, we grow the same types of potatoes as Idaho and other states, but we also have a lot of niche markets. So I'm sure you've heard of fingerling, creamer potatoes, round whites. A lot of people say they can't get them anymore. We still grow them in Michigan. A lot of states do not. We also happen to have the Honey Bear Cannery in Michigan, which a lot of people say that they've never seen canned potatoes, but I guarantee you they are in your Kroger and your Meijer's, and Honey Bear is right here in the state, and we grow most of the potatoes that go into those cans. When you look at overall production, which is the actual amount of potatoes that we grow per acre, we're ranked 8th in the U.S. So we are very well known for many things. We actually work with the Potatoes USA. We do the national chip trials here in Michigan. We had those up. So for those who are like, what is a national chip trial? You know what the Olympics are, right? Where they take the top athletes and they pit them against each other and they come up with statistics and they see who wins. We do the same thing for potatoes. So we take all of the different varieties that are out there and the new and upcoming varieties, we grow them in different regions across not only Michigan, but across the United States, and then we gather all of those statistics and we meet 3 times a year across the nation and we compare those statistics and we're like, which are the best varieties and do they compare with the varieties we currently have? Are they better than what we are currently growing? And so we're really focused in on, quality of potato, nutrition, as well as some of those climate change impacts, right? So can it use less water? Does it use less nitrogen? How much space does it need in between plants? So all of those considerations are taken into effect, and then we come out with the top winning potatoes for that year. So when we take a look at the commission, our mission obviously is to have an economically viable potato industry in the state. That's pretty broad. How do we go about that? We really have 4 different areas or pillars that we work under. One is to make sure that we have the talent necessary to have a viable industry in the state. And we can't do that alone. We have to work in collaboration with other commodity groups, with other state partners, with other groups that aren't affiliated even with agriculture, and you'll see that as we get into the presentation. Research and sustainability really are two of the two very important pieces of what we do. If we aren't continually looking at those aspects, then we will not be continue to be leaders in the nation in this industry. And then promotion. Like I said, a lot of people are surprised we even grow potatoes in the state. So we work really hard with a lot of different groups to promote potatoes, especially those grown in Michigan, to consumers all over the state. And then the last is to foster economic growth initiatives. And honestly, the MEDC has been great partners in this over the last few years. So we'll get into what each of those are and what they mean. Hope you like pictures. When it comes to talent development and then working in collaboration with others, you can see we have a long list of topics that we are really focused on: food safety, certified seed law, really looking at managing new and emerging diseases. You would think at this point that we would not have new diseases, but we have threats of new diseases coming in from Canada and other countries all the time. So we work really closely with APHIS and the USDA and different trade partners in different countries to really try to manage that continually. We also have some diseases that have been around a long time that we still are having trouble managing. So as the environment changes, as the weather patterns change, we really have to revisit some of these continually. Water is also really important to potatoes, so potatoes grow very well on irrigated land. We have a 30 or more % reduction in yield if potatoes don't get watered at the right time. Potatoes are a very expensive crop to grow, and water is one of those inputs you would think that we have relatively easy access to in the state, and we want to make sure we're using that resource responsibly and not affecting it or damaging it for future generations. And you'll probably hear from a lot of other ag groups: broadband, energy, roads. I think those are always going to be things that we talk about that probably will never go away, as they're always going to need to be updated as for technology and as time goes on. We are really proud to say that we have worked with a lot of groups within agriculture and with outside of agriculture to really pull together different coalitions to work on different topics. So we take the people who are most vested and most knowledgeable on those topics and pull them together over when time requires that we talk and have interested parties who are experts in those areas kind of come in and talk. So these are just some examples of some of the groups that we've worked with, and some of the, we're training. The picture in the bottom is actually a high school group from northern Michigan that we actually took on a 2-day field trip. So they got to see a irrigation pump be placed in an agricultural field. They went through all of the checks and balances, including taking stream measurements to make sure that that new well would not impact nearby water or groundwater resources. So 2 of these individuals are now looking to graduate, and now they're actually going into protecting water resources as their major. So that's pretty exciting. Research and sustainability. So this is really a very core pillar that I think the folks who were in charge of the Potato Commission way before me had some really great vision. So we work very closely with MSU as one of our largest partners. We actually have a potato outreach team at MSU that works to coordinate a lot of the plantings, where they go to farmers, and the farmers give them a piece of their field for them to plant different varieties, sometimes those chip trials we talked about, and the farmers pay for the inputs, they water them, they pay for the scouts to come out, they take care of all of the spraying and the nutrition that needs to happen, and then MSU team goes back in, they harvest those, and they do all of the analysis of those potatoes, and then we share it back out with the industry. The commission actually pays for the salary of 2 of those folks that are on that team. And then the commission owns a research storage facility directly adjacent to the Mount Cullum Research Facility that MSU has, because we really work well in conjunction with each other. So we pay part of the salary of the farm manager there. MSU, we allow them to store potato varieties in our storage facility. We pay for all of the maintenance and the cost of those potatoes to the tune of about $250,000 a year in operating funds, so that we can gather the best information about how to store potatoes. And that information really has what has created Michigan, or turned us into the largest chip producing state, because people want potato chips 365 days a year. Potatoes are harvested only in the fall, right? So how do we have potatoes that are nutritional, nutrient dense, free from diseases, and look spectacular coming out of storage almost like the day they went into storage? And it's been this storage research so that we can understand, what does the humidity have to be for each kind of potato? What is the best temperature to store these different varieties at, and every one of them is different. So they have spent the last couple of decades really honing in on that. So in Michigan, we can harvest potatoes and store them for a year, almost up to 13 months now, where we can take them out of storage and they are in the same great condition as the day they went in. So that makes our processors in the state more profitable, that makes the growers in the state more profitable, and we cut down on food waste and a lot of climate change issues that kind of come from those pieces. Plus, we're not trucking potatoes from Florida and from other states up to Michigan. So they really have been key. We're not only looking at chipping potatoes, though, so we have one of the best breeding doctors in the state. So when you go to international events and they're like, Dr. Potato, you feel a little special because you know this guy, right? So Dr. Dauschis and his team, they are the premier breeding specialists that are known all across the country and internationally, and they have developed a potato that you may have seen in bags from Great Lakes Chips, the purple potato chips. Yep, it's called the Blackberry, and we are getting a ton of demand. We just sent the Blackberry out to have it nutritionally analyzed. So the same company that puts the labels on the back of all of the food that you see in the grocery store, they did the analysis on this and compared the Blackberry to the industry standard purple potato. And some of the results were really, really interesting. So the purple potato, the Blackberry, has more antioxidants in it than a blueberry, or it's equivalent to blueberries. So one serving of Blackberry potato was almost equal to a serving of blueberries, which is pretty phenomenal. They keep their beautiful purple color when you cook them, so get some around Halloween time and have purple mashed potatoes and blow your kids' minds. When it comes to sustainability, this contraption that you see in the middle, Dr. Dauschis and his team and the potato outreach team really are taking a look when it comes to varieties at that sustainability and climate change piece, right? How can we grow potatoes with less water? How can we grow potatoes that are more resistant to all sorts of diseases and bugs so that we can use fewer chemistries to control those items? And so they ingeniously built this contraption out of lots of spare parts and different pieces, and what it mimics is it actually raises the temperature underneath it at least 10 degrees. And so what they do is it's mobile. They collected data to understand, like, when is the most critical time to water potatoes? When can potatoes withstand a drought and still have a high yield? Which potato varieties handle drought better than others, and which potato varieties used less nitrogen and still provided a top yield. They have found some very surprising pieces of information, which we are now sharing with the industry, and then working to kind of replicate these trials again and really hone in on what does this mean economically, right? So it's great if we can have potato varieties that are more heat tolerant. They need to yield and they need to be profitable for the farmer, and the quality's got to be the same. So there's a lot of different factors that play into these, but really fascinating pieces that are happening there. When it comes to nutrition research, the potato gets a bad rap, right? Like potato is considered a starch. Potato is not a starch. Potato is a nutrient-dense vegetable with more vitamin C than an orange, more potassium than a banana. It's got 3 grams of protein in one serving. Like, potatoes are really great. Some of the stuff we put on top of potatoes, maybe not so great, right? So really working with different companies to do nutrition research, because there hasn't been any for decades on potatoes, and so we're finding some really fascinating things. So I don't know how many of you have heard, if you have diabetes or you really have to watch your blood sugar levels, you shouldn't eat potatoes. Well, if you cook a potato any way you want and you refrigerate it for 24 hours, you can reheat it if you want, or you can eat it cold, and what that cooling process does is it links the carbohydrate chains together and creates a long chain, which takes a lot longer to digest, and so it impacts the blood sugar levels a lot less than eating a freshly cooked potato. I know, it's fantastic, right? Who knew? We've also worked with a lot of athletes in fueling with potatoes instead of the goos and the gels and some of the things that are out there on the market. And some people now, like top athletes, Olympic athletes, are using potatoes as their fueling instead of those manufactured products. So it's very interesting stuff. I'm going to play a little bit off of the folks who were here before me. We do work really closely as well with the Fair Food Network and the Double Up Food Bucks program in Michigan. I'm not going to repeat what she said, but we work really closely with them to understand how we can better support those programs. So we use specialty crop block grant dollars from the USDA. We are currently working on a program with them right now where we have selected 6 independent grocers within the city or outer limits of the city of Detroit. These grocer retail owners do not speak English as their first language. They did not have connections to be able to purchase Michigan potatoes or other local produce, because they just didn't have those connections. And so we're helping to create signage so that people understand the nutritional benefits of the potato, how to store them properly, how to freeze them, can them, expand their shelf life, and then also helping them to understand how they can use the Double Up Food Bucks program to really get more potatoes and other vegetables into their diet. So it's helping us understand our market a little bit better in areas that we didn't know this existed, and hopefully we're connecting more food insecure folks with ways that they can make ends meet and have access to healthy fruits and vegetables. The Fair Food Network partnered with U of M, the health systems, and they collected health data on Double Up Food Bucks participants at the beginning of the program, and then just last year they brought these participants back in and they recollected their health data, and the report says that the folks on Double Up Food Bucks eat more fruits and vegetables than the average American, and they saw health benefit increases. So the health of these participants actually got better over the time they participated in this program. So connecting back to the health system and using food as a prescription. So this is a snapshot of that research storage facility. I was going to try to describe it to you, but it's hard for you to close your eyes and imagine a football field with a 2-story barn over the top of it, filled to the top with potatoes. So here are some actual photos, though, of the research storage facilities that we have in conjunction with MSU. And in the top right corner, you see the 2 ladies with shovels there, and then those multiple buckled doors. So when we fill those storages, each of these bins mimic a large storage facility, right? So we fill these one layer at a time with a certain kind of potato. Each bin then has its own air system that flows through it, and measurements for humidity and temperature and all that kind of stuff. And then we work to have at least one field day a year where industry partners can come out and take a look at our storages, and we can impart upon them what we've learned for the year. But also, we have partners in the processing side as well. So we'll call up Phil from Better Made and say, hey, we have a bin of Mackinaws. The sugar sampling looks like they're at the end of their life cycle. They're great now, but you should take them in the next week. And they actually will do test samples and fry them up, and they'll give us their input. What do they like? What do they not like? Because if the end product isn't good for the processors and the people that they're trying to make happy, then it doesn't work for everyone. So we really involve all people at all steps in the industry to make sure that we have the varieties that are going to work for everyone in the system. And then again, promotion to the public. So boy, we use a lot of specialty crop block grant dollars when we can. We learn something new every time. So the bag in the bottom right-hand corner, you can see the little quick lock tag on there. On the other side of that was a QR code. If they scanned that, it took them to a map. They put in their address and their name, and it put a pinpoint on the map. So we could see where our Michigan potatoes were ending up. And surprisingly, they went a lot farther than we thought they did. So they were way past down into Georgia and Florida, and even over into Kentucky and some other states. So it was very interesting. And then of course they automatically then sign up to get our customer newsletter, where we really focus on potato nutrition, healthy recipes, some non-healthy recipes, and how to store those potatoes and can them and all sorts of things. So we have quite the following on that. Like everyone else, we do trade shows and expos as well to just continue to get the word out there to our partners in the school nutrition programs, restaurants, and other associations. We've also started doing geofencing. If you are not familiar with that, there's right now only 3 of us at Michigan Potatoes, and there's a lot of conferences and a lot of places where we would love to educate people about the benefits of Michigan potatoes. We can't be in all of those places, and we can only touch a fraction of the people that would be at those events. So we're using geofencing. So some of the things we're doing this summer, there's Taylor Swift concerts happening in Detroit. So there will be people, when they open their browser, they're going to get ads for Michigan potatoes. We're going to be on gas stations and billboards down there during those times. So it'll be a fun time. It'll be a fun time. But we also really share that nutrition research with them as well, so that they can really understand what trusted sources can they go to for information. Some of the consumer trends we're really focused on, I keep saying the word sustainability. Sustainability is really important to us as potato farmers as it is to the rest of the ag industry. But potatoes are at a little bit of a disadvantage, right? Because when you disrupt the soil like we have to when we harvest potatoes, we release carbon, right? So we don't have the carbon sequestration properties that other crops have the ability to benefit from. So we're really looking at water use, using less chemistries and fewer nutrients, but still getting a great product out of the end of that. And it's important. People are like, it's a fad, it'll go away. The numbers show that it is not a fad, it will not go away, and more people are really paying attention to products that they believe to have sustainability properties with it. So paying attention to that. Potato product preference. People aren't buying 10-pound bags of potatoes anymore, right? Like 50 years ago, they used to say our best customer for potatoes was the trash can, because people would buy 10-pound bags and then they'd leave them under their sink until they smelled bad, and then they threw them away. So really focusing in on packaging that works best for consumers. So they're buying smaller quantities. A lot of those kind of ready to heat type products that are in a container, you just pop it in the microwave. Really looking at how do we make that packaging more sustainable and provide that so we have less food waste. And then, of course, in the end, foster economic growth initiatives. I would like to see us grow more than just the potatoes we're growing now, and there is a lot of interest in it. So what we have here, how many of you have heard of wine chips? Wine chips. This is our newest processor in the state of Michigan, down by Three Rivers. They are finally fully up and functioning and operational. They were processing at Downey's potato chips, but now they have all their stuff installed and they're good to go. They come in these little canisters, and you pay about $25 for a canister of it, but it's cut almost like a Crispix or Chex Mix cereal. So it's a lattice cut. They're really thick, and they put a ton of seasoning on them, and then they've matched them to the best wine that they go with. So really, it's a niche. It's a really niche market that we were able to bring to Michigan from California. So again, the MEDC was really critical in helping to make those connections. We're investing in new technologies that help us to reduce water use at processing facilities and to reduce food waste, so potato starch. There are some facilities that when when you slice a potato and you kind of get that white watery substance, so that white stuff is starch that's coming out of the potato, and so some of that is removed before those potatoes go into the fryer, and then it's dried for potato starch. Right now, some goes into dog food. In town here, you've got Michigrain. Michigrain uses the starch from Better Made potatoes to make their potato vodka. So there's a lot of different areas we can go into. And then, of course, I have French fries and tater tots on here. Right now, we don't grow or have a processor for French fries in the state. However, we are courting a very large company to try to come to Michigan. They are looking to put another plant out east, and we are definitely in the running for that. And we do have room to expand potato production to be able to support that. So a lot of really cool things happening out there, and really just creating more demand for potatoes, Michigan potatoes. And in the end, we would love for you guys to come out and take a visit. Like, I can tell you about these things, but it's nothing like seeing it in person, right? So we've got potato storage facilities, and all the way to the left, maybe it's it's some of your lefts. That is a potato storage facility. That is one, and they are back to back to back. And so those potatoes are stacked 2 stories high. And it's really hard to imagine, but when you're standing at the bottom of that stack, it becomes real. We also use a lot of technology in sorting, and so the machines that are on the other side of that screen, they use electronic eyes, and one potato goes through at a time, and it not only scores the potato, but there's like little metal feet that come out and kind of kick it off into the correct bin. So it's scored by size, it's scored by internal defects. There is a machine that actually scans each of those potatoes. It can tell if there's things like bruise or hollow heart or any scab on the skin, and it collects all of that data and sorts all of those potatoes like really, really quick. So it'd be really cool for you guys to see some of this stuff in person. So in the end, very large industry, huge economic impact, and we would love for you to come visit us.
Thank you for that wonderful presentation. All things potato. It was amazing. And yes, I grew up on those canned potatoes. We're going to take some questions here. First from our Vice Chair Pice.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Could you expound a bit on the impact of the Lake Erie Basin?
Yes, so I'm sure everyone has heard about the algae blooms in the Lake Erie Basin. So we are part of, there's a lot of ag groups that have come together to really look at what is the phosphorus impact and how can farmers really hone in on what it is that they're putting in there. Potato growers are very progressive, and I would love to show you the technology. We were just out on a farm where in the winter they prepare for planting. And by doing that, they go out in a grid system in all of the fields that they're going to have potatoes. And in the grid system, they do soil sampling. So they know exactly how much nitrogen, how much phosphorus, how much potassium is currently in the ground, how much is going to be needed. And they produce colored graphs, right? So they can, in different colors, mean that the soil in those locations need different types of fertilizer. They then program the application equipment that's going to be putting the potatoes in the ground along with any sort of fertilizer at the time of planting. And so as they go across the field, those machines are constantly changing and putting different amounts of each of those nutrients in different spots on the field so that they make sure they have only the amount they need, and there's not a risk of losing that to leaching. So taking care of the water resources is very important to us. As I mentioned, potatoes are a highly irrigated crop, right? So it's non-consumptive. We take the water out of the ground, we spray it on the plants, water goes through the soil and back into to recharge the aquifer. However, it's important that we aren't leading to contamination, we aren't overwatering, we're not leading to runoff and all of those pieces, because this is a lifestyle for these folks. And a lot of these guys have been in potato farming for generations, and they have kids and grandkids who they want to take over that farm, and they're not going to be able to do it if they don't have the resources there to do it. So it's sustainability is key for them.
Representative Nyer. And keep in mind that we'll only have time for a few more questions. We're getting close.
Yeah. Thank you for coming today. I think you're selling yourself short. All the rage right now, as far as environmental goes, all the rage right now is cover crops in the ag industry there. I remember for years driving by post and harvested pre and post harvest crops there of the potato industry using cover crops to keep the soil in place to prevent runoff. So you just might want to mention that as something that is been exercised for decades.
Absolutely. And even in potato farming, our researchers are looking at how do we combine cover crops with potatoes, right? So we reduce the risk of losing any of that topsoil, even though we are disturbing the soil a lot for planting and for harvesting. We're also looking at growing potatoes in a circle. So if you've ever seen aerial pictures from out west, their fields are round, right? They don't farm the corners. The corners are money losers, right? That's where the irrigation doesn't reach. And so we're actually doing some research, and can we farm potatoes in a circle, right? And really take advantage of the water resources we have and eliminate kind of the waste areas, as well as dragging hoses. So instead of the aerial application that you've seen, look like a sprinkler from your house, right? You could actually drag hoses so the water gets put really close to the roots. You lose less to evaporation. So we're really working on how can we continue honing the practices that we have and we've been using for the last 50 years to make them better. But they also have to be practical and can't be cost prohibitive, so there's a balance.
Representative Young.
As long as you get Representative Dievendorf. Okay, so this is exciting. Potato is one of my favorite foods. Thank you for taking the stigma off of potato. We have to get rid of that. It's not the potato. It's the ranch and the bacon and the cheese. But with that, inflation is a real thing. And because I love potatoes and I like to cook food fast, I would buy these frozen cube potatoes that were $3 and now they're $6. And potatoes, I can't find any potatoes that haven't gone up like at least $1 in the cost. And I'm trying to, can you help me understand what's happening with this cost of potatoes, one of my favorite foods?
I can absolutely. Potatoes, even though we love them, they are not exempt from the inflationary pieces that we've seen, right? So the cost of fuel, the cost of seed potatoes, the cost of chemistries, the cost of fertilizers have all skyrocketed. So all of the input costs that it takes to grow these potatoes have went up. Then you start talking about the frozen potatoes that come, they're very convenient, they're cut up, right? So there is a processing plant that has to pay people, and wages have gone up as well. So costs along the entire supply chain have risen. So even for us, we buy, for our storage facilities, we buy potatoes right out of the field, which is the cheapest way you can buy them. So as they're harvesting them, we buy them right out of the field. Last year we paid $13.50 for 100 pounds of potatoes. This year we're at $15.50. Just talking to potato chip processors in the state, the cost of film, so to make the bags of potatoes have gone up. The pallets, the cardboard for boxes, everything has gone up in price. And so along with all of the other food in the grocery store, the difference has to be made up somewhere, because otherwise people go out of business. So it's unfortunate, but it's definitely happening.
Thank you for explaining that. You can kind of guess, but I don't know how we fix it, because potatoes are a staple for like poor people, right? If you can't get anything else, you can get a potato and you can be full. That can become a meal for you, and it's starting to become like cost prohibitive, and so that's concerning. The last thing I'll say, and I'll move on, and then we gotta hurry up, is thank you for explaining these wine chips, because I was thinking you were soaking the potatoes in wine. I was the only one. And I'm like, oh my God, they're soaking potatoes in wine and then feeding them to people. So, okay, it's just a pairing, correct?
Yes.
Very
yes,
good.
It's a pairing.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
I'm going to try and work in these last two questions. So we're going to go on to Rep. Vanderwall, and then we're going to go next to Emily Diefendorf. We'll finish. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Kelly, for being here today. Just as Michigan becomes larger, I don't know what our production went up in the last few years, but what we're seeing now foreign-wise with Ukraine and the situation they are, has Michigan got into any of the export business or the U.S., and what do you see the future of that doing to the supply chain of potatoes here in Michigan and the United States?
So we've been relatively flat in production over the last decade. We fluctuate 1,500 acres back and forth, really depending on the year. We don't ship a lot of stuff out of Michigan to Japan and other countries. However, out west, so you've got very large potato growing states, state of Washington, California, even New Mexico grows quite a few potatoes. We just opened the Fresh Access to Mexico, which really doubled the exports of potatoes leaving the United States and going to other countries. That is fantastic news for us here in Michigan, because that means those potatoes grown in the West keep going west. They don't come east, right? And so if potatoes don't come east, that opens up more market access for us to be able to sell our different potatoes that we have here. So we advocate pretty heavily with those other states through Potatoes USA and the National Potato Council to make sure we've got fair trade and that we open up trade. Japan is the one we're working on pretty heavily right now, trying to get the USDA to reopen negotiations with them, because the volume to Japan could be equal that of Mexico, which would be huge for us in the United States. The only thing we really do a lot of international shipping on in our state is we have one very unique facility, and it's unique to the United States, and that is a seed company that grows mini tubers, so about this size, between a nickel and a quarter, and it's all grown hydroponically, and they ship to many countries, even Chile, Jordan, Australia, because they have such high phytosanitary conditions. Like when you go there, you basically have to go through a scrub down, and you have to put suits on, and you have to walk through all sorts of disinfectant before you could even get into the facility, because they make sure that seed is very clean so that they can sell that internationally. So that could be a really cool place for you guys to visit.
Indeed. Our last question will be from Rep. Diefendorf, and I hope it's a short one, and if not, we can take it offline after this committee, so thank you.
People always say, I hope it's a short one to me. So I had a question that was similar to the crop cover question, and will be pretty easy for you to answer. Considering your 3-year cycle for potatoes and the land being unusable for potatoes in between, I was wondering in that those 3 years if there is a rotation with a particular kind of crop or a couple of crops that you would consider essentially complementary towards soil renewal, or if you are utilizing a fallow stage, or if you are utilizing some other forms of regenerative farming in order to bring that soil back.
The short answer is yes, all of those pieces. And every farm is unique into what pieces of equipment they have that complements this. Corn, soybeans, dry beans are very popular. We have some that grow watermelons and squash on them. Some put in hay crop rotations. And we actually have one farm in the state. They are on a 5-year rotation, and they plant alfalfa, and they do not harvest it ever. And when it comes to the 5th year where they can put potatoes in, they kill off the alfalfa, they till it under, and then they plant potatoes. And then the next 5 years, they grow a cover crop and they leave it. They don't harvest it. So every farm kind of has their secret sauce, right? So it's, what Grandpa did to be successful, and then they've honed in on that and really used those. So everybody's a little bit different, but soil health is the #1 concern for potato farmers, because there's so many soil-borne illnesses, there's so many things that can go wrong with growing a potato plant if you don't have the right nutrient contents. That really is one of the major focuses.
Thank you, Dr. Turner, for an excellent presentation, all things potato. It's wonderful to know that I can start eating them again. I don't have to worry about those carbs because you've taken that out, and we can eat them just as much as we can blueberries.
You're welcome.
I'm glad to hear that water is also a big issue for you, and that you're concerned about that as well. If you have additional information, you can send our office on water and also storage. That would be very helpful. And we're going to wrap this up. Thank you, everyone. If there's no further business before this committee and there's no absent members, we are adjourned.